United We Om is a 501c3 nonprofit sharing accessible yoga and meditation with trauma-impacted and under-resourced communities. All of our workshops and trainings are offered by donation with no minimum donation. And your donation directly supports our mission of making the benefits of practice available to everyone. Thanks to supporters like you, we've continued to provide practice virtually throughout the pandemic. Learn more and support our work at unitedweom.org. Thank you.
I cherished our time together in part one, and I've been so looking forward to being with you again today. And I'm very excited to go a little bit deeper together into the medicine of the ratio of the breath. So last week, just so we can all get on the same page together again, last week we explored why the breath is so intricately linked to our nervous system and our sense of well-being and safety. And then we explored our own everyday breath. And we used an analogy of a horse being the prana, the energetic building blocks of the universe, but that is us within us and flows through us when we're alive. And that being the breath, and the idea of the rider being our mind, our chitta, and how well our horse and our mind travel through this life depends on their ability to find rhythm together. And the place that the horse and rider together are moving towards is a place of freedom, of preconditioned wildness. This is what's beautiful about the breath to me. Nobody here needs to learn how to breathe. We are all just peeling back veils of samskara, veils of physical tension and emotional grooves to rediscover that which we innately do in a wild, free, and beautiful way. So, the ratio of the breath. We spoke last week about the vagus nerve and how the vagus nerve innervates the diaphragm, runs right through the center of the diaphragm. So we know that breathing from last week, and how we breathe, and whether our diaphragm releases down fully and contracts back up fully, is sending signals constantly to our brain about whether we're safe or not. So today we're going to talk about how we can take that knowledge and take action with it. Because I think in yoga, there's a lot of emphasis, especially right now, on mindfulness and awareness, which is all great. But in yoga, we have to take that awareness, that knowledge we've gained, and we have to then take action with it. We have to do something with it. So today we're going to walk into that, how we are being, and move into some doing that will move us closer to balance. So the key with the breath ratio is really simple. It's slower and longer, fuller exhales. That's it. It sounds really simple. So today we're going to talk just briefly about what that looks like, and then we're going to move a little bit, and then we're going to breathe a lot. So slower. In this way, we talked about the 4 qualities of the breath last week. This addresses the quality of time. And when we slow down our breath, meaning we take less breaths per minute, this does a few things right away. The first thing is we know that when we slow our breath, we're more able to fill down to the bottom of our lungs. Our diaphragm is more able to expand and contract. And this taps that beautiful gas pedal of the vagus nerve to keep us in that space of resilience in our nervous system. Every inhale, the sympathetic nervous system has its moment. Our heart beats a little faster. Every exhale, our parasympathetic nervous system has its moment. The heart beats a little slower. When we say slower, we have a kind of an idea of what we could be aiming for. And that is called the resonant rate or the golden ratio. And depending on how tall you are, if there's anybody here with me today who's over 6 feet tall, I will share that your resonant rate might be a little bit different. For most of us, this golden ratio of how many breaths per minute is particularly healing is 5.5 or between 5 and 6. If you're over 6 feet tall, it's actually closer to 3 or 3.5 breaths per minute. Your circulatory system has a lot longer to travel all of the oxygen molecules, so need a few more breaths per minute. Very simply, what this does is it puts our lungs, heart, brain, digestive system all into synchronicity. And this is the state of being that our body is most able to thrive in. Heart rate variability is maximized there. So remember last week, we were looking to see if we could feel some variation between our inhale and our exhale. So in that 5 to 6 breath per minute range, we start to discover some really beautiful flexibility between increase of heart rate on inhale, decrease of heart rate on exhale. When we start to slow the breath this way, it also begins to, there was a great question last week. It starts to slow our heart rate, which can lower our blood pressure, and is documented all over the place of being just a really great way to begin if you have like high resting heart rate or high blood pressure. And what's really neat is that the yogis in many of the old writings say that the more we slow our breath, the less breaths we take per minute, the more able, they observed, our brain is to access the part of our brain responsible for creativity and inspiration. Has anybody else noticed that when you're in yoga or you're meditating, shavasana, or you're breathing, you receive the best ideas? Anybody? Yeah. So the yogis observe this, and science backs it up, that when we bring ourselves into this beautiful resonant rate, our body feels really safe. The parts of our brain that are overworking to try and analyze danger, get ready to mobilize, and all of those things, or even if they're just not coherent, the heart's over here, the brain's over there, the body's over there, we're really not able to get into that space of our brain that can receive these beautiful inspirations. So there's that too, which I know a lot of us have experienced. So that is slower. In a nutshell, between 5 and 6 breaths per minute. And the other side of it are longer, fuller exhales. So we'll go back to the vagus nerve one more time. We remember from last week that the lower lobe of our lungs have most of the receptors for the vagus nerve, the brake pedal, resting, healing. And the upper lobes of the lungs have most of the receptors for the sympathetic nervous system, or activate, mobilize. When we take a longer exhale and a slower inhale, the slower inhale allows for more air to fill down into the lower lobe of the lungs. But the real magic happens with the receptors for the vagus nerve when we slow our exhale. And when we slowly exhale out of the lower lobes of the lungs and exhale until our exhale is complete, that deeply engages the parasympathetic nervous system. And here's the other really interesting thing. We have a part of our brain called chemoreceptors. This is one part of our brain responsible for our involuntary breathing. So we all know, we think about breathing as autonomic or automatic, but we know that we can affect it ourselves. So what determines what our resting breath is like? Because we all may have noticed over this past week, getting to know our horse, as we said, that different times of day, our breath is really different. And if any of us shared that with each other, we would discover we all have a very unique resting breath. The chemoreceptors are in the brain, and what they do is they are constantly testing the pH level of our blood, like a fish tank. And the way that they can sense the pH level of our blood is through how much carbon dioxide is in our body. More carbon dioxide changes our pH, Not enough carbon dioxide changes our pH. The chemoreceptors, which are in the brain but also in our major blood vessels, are constantly sending messages to the brain. We need a little bit more oxygen. We need a little less carbon dioxide. This is why as you breathe, even though today we may be doing voluntary breathing, you may notice, or you may have noticed last week, that you may be, well, particularly today because we're going to be more voluntary with our breath today. You may notice that I'm trying to see if I can count into 4 and out to 4, but all of a sudden some part of my body kind of takes over and asks me to catch my breath. So what's happening is the chemoreceptors in our brain can become conditioned to a particular alkalinity, a particular pH in our body. And it can tell us that we actually need more oxygen than we really need. And this is why I believe a lot of us, when we live in a stress response or a chronic stress state where we're breathing high and shallow and a lot, we're taking in a lot of oxygen, it's a process to start to slow the breath down or to lengthen the exhale out or to discover the pause at the end of the exhale. It really is our body saying, not enough, that's not enough oxygen. We need to accelerate our breath so that we can bring our oxygen up. But it is something that we can, through working together with our horse and our awareness, we can start to lengthen the exhale, we can lengthen the breath, and we can condition our body to feel differently about how much carbon dioxide it'll accept. So if you're breathing now or in the future and you feel that catch your breath moment, know that that's something that we can walk through with time. And little by little, has anybody noticed in their own breathing, they started out and a 6-count breath felt so long, but then sometime later, all of a sudden it was like, I'm going for 12. So the chemoreceptors have learned to say like, okay, actually, we can accept this length of breath now. That helps us get to that resonant rate without feeling air hunger or starved for air. So we'll talk next week about its relationship with anxiety and panic, which is also very interesting. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to create space in the body for more breath capacity and to create some ease with some of the muscles that participate in our breathing. And we're going to do some shapes. And next week we'll do different shapes. And I'll also attach to this whole course when it's completed, or if you're watching it now completed, a list of shapes as well. So you could refer and kind of come up with your own. We're also going to add a little bit of resistance to our breath. We're not going to practice Yogic per se. That's a more traditional yogic pranayama. We may touch it next week, but we may not. This week, we're just going to play around with adding resistance to help slow our breath and our exhale. And that's it. Sound good? All right, great. So if you're going to join us moving today, you can, of course. If you're in your office or something like that and you want to hang in your chair, you can be really creative about choosing a shape to join us with, or you can just listen and send your awareness to those different parts of the body. Are there any questions? You can pop them in the chat. You can raise your hand, your blue hand. Excellent. Fabulous. Okay. So we'll get ready to move. So I'm going to walk back onto my yoga mat in just one moment. And first I'll just anchor kind of the main parts of the body that we might want to address in our own breathing practice, just to create some more ease and balance. So our hips, front hips, like the iliopsoas muscle, our inner legs, our inner upper legs, our outer hips, the whole girdle of the pelvis, starting to create a little more ease there, not only helps balance out our spine so that our body has a really, really nice channel for our breath to move through. And it also creates a little more ease for the thoracic diaphragm to move up and down. So we're going to do a couple shapes that address that. We're going to address the intercostals. And today we're going to particularly focus on the front body because we talked about our lifestyle giving a lot of us a slump forward a lot of the time. So we're going to explore making a little space in the intercostal muscles, muscles between the ribs of the front rib case. And we're also going to explore broadening across the back shoulder blades. Because although we do a slumpy thing, when we practice yoga, I've noticed a lot of us kind of accentuate a pinching the shoulder blades in together. And this actually cuts off the amount of air that we can take in the scapula clavicle region into the eyes of the lungs. All right, so that's what we'll do today. I'm going to walk back to my mat. You can join me on the couch, on the floor, get rid of this, or in your chair. I have some toys here. I'm all about not feeling like you need yoga props at home to be able to practice yoga. But if you have them, you should use them because you invested in them. So if you have laying nearby you any kind of blanket, that's really great. A couch pillow, a bed pillow, a towel. And now or another time if you have a bolster or something like that. Beautiful. So the first shape that we can practice is going to be a shape for inner legs. And I'm going to combine two shapes together in the interest of time. So I'm going to combine what we call a belly roll, where I take a blanket or a towel, I fold it and I roll it up into a cylinder. Not a big thick one. We're going to start small and you can always make it thicker. I'm going to lay it down in my space. And then this belly roll is going to support the lumbar curve of my spine. And the purpose of it is to create a little ease and release across the rectus abdominis. We talked last week about tension in the abdominals restricts the diaphragm's ability to expand down. So we're going to cultivate a little length and ease there. So I'm going to walk my way back over my roll. And when I get there, I want to feel it supporting my lower back, and I can roll it to make it thicker, or I can unroll it to bring less arc to my back. So if you're here and you think this feels just perfect, it might feel nice to have the feet flat to the floor and to lean the knees together. If you want to add in a little release of the inner upper leg, like we discussed, you can explore taking the soles of the feet together and the knees out to the side. If that doesn't feel right to you, either because it brings extra tension or it just is not appropriate for you emotionally or in any way, it's not necessary. You can return to your feet flat, your knees bent. And I'm just going to take a moment here, a few breaths. You might have noticed I rest my hands on my low belly because that's a place where I tend to restrict my breath. And I'm just going to watch my everyday breath in this shape. And you can stay here, or if you like, if you feel like you could tolerate a little more release in the front belly, you can extend your legs out long, flexing your feet, staying really active through your legs. And I'm going to reach my right arm up to the ceiling and then my left arm up to the ceiling. I'm going to rock to my right, stretch my left arm up, and imagine my scapula, my shoulder blade, is moving to the left, away from my spine. I'm going to lay my scapula back down. Stretch my right arm up, feel my right scapula move away from my spine. Release my scapula back down. And then I'm going to hold onto my opposite elbows. And slowly, slowly, I may let my arms travel up towards the top of my head. If you notice your low ribs poke up, just pause for a moment. A nice action is anchoring the tailbone as if it's reaching towards your heels. And feeling as if your lowest floating ribs in your back are drawing slightly up away from the roll. I ran into my props, so I ran out of room. But if you have room, your arms can go as far over your head as feels good. Let's bring awareness to releasing the front abdominal muscles as we inhale. And then without contracting them, just notice how they do contract and put in effort to help the diaphragm up on the exhale. And then slowly, if my arms were up and overhead, I'm going to start to lower them back down. My legs were out long, or if your feet were together, your knees out to the side, you can help them back up until the feet are flat on the floor. I'm going to roll over to my side, walk myself up, and I'm going to take my roll. I'm going to unroll it, and this time I'm going to fold it so that it makes a narrow rectangle. And if you have a towel, that works too, because this is probably a little bit thick. So now we're going to explore some more space in the intercostals in the upper rib cage. So this time, as I bring myself back onto my towel or blanket, I'm going to imagine that my scapula, my big triangular shoulder blades, are going to rest supported on the blanket. So once you get down there, you probably need to shift yourself around a little bit. Now my rectangle is a little high, so I'm going to grab something to support my head so that my head isn't draped way back. Being a little sloppy about it. So my shoulder blades, again, are resting completely on my rectangular blanket. My head is supported. My feet are bent. I'm going to rest my knees together, encourage some release in my sacrum. And I'm going to take my arms out to the side so my arms are kind of above my blanket. Just going to be aware of where I feel breath movement in my upper rib cage, up by my clavicles, collarbones. Just do a little body mapping here. So notice what the right side of your upper rib cage feels like as you inhale. And as you exhale. Notice what the left side of your rib cage feels like as you breathe. And be aware of anything that rises up. Physical tension, physical groove, or an emotional groove, something that comes up. And just think of it as getting to intimately know yourself, your horse. And then slowly I'll bring my feet back towards each other and roll my way over onto my side. Walk my way up off of my folded blanket. And now I'm going to sit. And it can be really nice to use some blanket or towel to elevate just your sitting bones. And what I mean by that is that my seat is on my blanket, but my knees and my ankles are not on my blanket. So it's just helping me, only of tight hips, to lift my hips slightly above my knees, which creates more ease in the ascension of our spine. So I have my legs crisscross, but what I'm going to do is slide my right leg out in front slightly so that my right shin is kind of in a a parallel line to my mat. I'm going to flex my right toes and I'm going to allow an inhale to remind me of length moving up the front of my spine, which runs deep within us in the heart axis. And as I exhale, I'm going to feel the energy move down my back of my spine, allowing downward energy release down of my tailbone. And as you feel there's room for it, you could begin to hinge or tilt yourself forward. And little by little, right foot stays flexed. Just explore what the right outer hip, piriformis muscle, IT band. And just notice physical tension, physical grooves there. Notice if, as you let your breath flow fully in and out, you feel a change in sensation in your body at all. And I'm going to walk my way back up. I'm going to switch legs. So if you practice asana a lot, you might recognize that this could also be Agni Stambhasana, the fire log shape. So you're welcome to do that instead as well. But I think it's a really good practice to simplify. I think in really strong asanas, we might still be breathing, but we lose our ability to contact the subtlety of our breath because we can be really overwhelmed by the physical sensations. So that's why I think really simple asanas are a great way to start to tune into your breath moving with your body. You can remember the krura, the roots of the diaphragm attached down at the lumbar spine, contracting as we inhale to pull the diaphragm down. Softening and releasing as we exhale, as the diaphragm rises back up. Now walk my way back up again. So now, if you're going to practice your breathing seated today, you can practice this next shape seated. Just going to stretch side ribs, intercostals. If you think that you're going to practice breathing lying down today, which I recommend if you haven't before or you don't usually, you can bring yourself to lie down now on your back. You can keep your feet flat and your knees bent. So if we're seated, we're going to allow our right arm to rise up. And just as yesterday, we're going to arc up more than over, sending energy through the elevated arm. If you're on your back, a really nice one is the yin pose where you look like a banana. And you take your arms up over your head and then you arc your whole body over to one side. So I'm arced to the left. I'm pressing energy through my right foot and I'm extending that energy up and over the right rib cage, through my right arm, out through my right fingertips. So just be aware of the breath moving in and out of the body. Maybe being aware of any extra space you have to breathe into on the right side of your body. And then slowly returning back to center. And we'll arc over to the other side. So if you're seated, the other arm up and over. If you're on your back, press energy particularly through your left foot. You can arc your torso over to the right and extend the energy out through the left foot, up along the left side, and through the left arm, out past the fingertips. And encounter this new side with curiosity. We're not robots or Legos. Sides of our body are different because of our lives. Just give this side as much attention as you gave the other. And we'll come back through the center. And if you're going to sit for breathing, you can adjust your seat. It's comfortable. If you're going to lie on your back, it can be nice to leave your knees bent and lean them together, or to slide your rolled up blanket or towel under your knees. And I'm going to share the breathing with you sitting by my computer, so it's easier to hear me. How are we all doing? I see almost no bodies, which is a great sign. Everybody's like, my camera's off, or I'm in my space. All right. So the most important thing is that you're comfortable and able to relax. If you start seated and you decide you'd rather lie down, make any change, and vice versa. If you lie down and you feel like, actually, I'd like to sit, you can always move your position. So when we breathe, we always start with a body mapping, just to discover where our body is in space. So just bring your awareness to your feet, lower legs and knees, upper legs, and see if you can sense where your legs and feet are in space. Maybe you can tune in and notice if there's any asymmetry there that is habit that you can slightly adjust now that you've brought your attention to it. You can let your awareness travel to the low back, the middle back, upper back, backs of the shoulders. If you notice any contraction or pinching, you could explore that scapula broadening moment, reaching one arm and then the other up towards the ceiling and walking your scapula slightly away from your spine and then allowing your arms to travel back down again. And draw your awareness to the space below your navel. Noticing any gripping that you can soften. Awareness to the space between your navel and your sternum, your solar plexus. It's looking for any softening, any space that can be created. In the space of the rib cage, and the upper rib cage, collarbones. Remembering that the eyes of the lungs travel all the way up by the collarbones. So imagining space to breathe between the collarbones and the muscles of the shoulders, a broadening. And then let's check in with that beautiful hyoidal bone, which gives us information about our head being balanced on its axis. So whether you're on the floor or you're seated, you can gently nod your head, yes. Feeling how the head tips back and forth on its axis. And see if you can find a spot where you feel softening in the front of the throat and length in the back of the neck. And then drawing attention to the back of the head. If you're reclining, let the head be held by what's beneath it. Let this send a wave of ease and softness along the scalp and forehead. Sense a broadening between the eyebrows and along the bridge of the nose. Relaxing the nostrils, imagining they were softening downward toward your upper lip. Lips resting gently against each other. Teeth slightly parted. Tongue softening and broadening in the bottom jaw. Space in the ear canals. And the tongue connected to that hyoidal bone as you soften the tongue. Imagine ease moving down along the throat. So we'll explore a little bit of resistance in our breath in a moment. Before we go there, I invite you to notice our qualities of our breath. Just notice the time, like you're meeting your beautiful horse. Check in with how that horse is in this moment. What is the length of your inhale today in this moment and the length of your exhale? As you observe it, does it lengthen? And we'll notice the texture of our breath in this moment. Noticing texture of the inhale. Is it tight or free, choppy or smooth? Does it hit a hitch anywhere along the way? Awareness of our exhale, the texture of our exhale. And the breath is a great reminder that there's only now. Now is reality. Because whatever the breath was like last week, it's really not important anymore to meet ourselves again freshly in each moment. Texture of the exhale. And then we'll notice the space within our body. Can imagine allowing the inhales to travel down into the lower lungs, feeling space and movement perhaps in the lower belly on the inhale, and a release and hugging inward in the lower belly on the exhale. And just with your awareness, sense the space of your lungs and rib case. Can you sense expansion in just the front areas of the ribs and lungs? And notice if you can breathe consciously into the back of the lungs and the back body. And bringing your awareness and conscious breath into the upper chest. If you notice the throat or nostrils or tongue grip to try and make the breathing possible, remember it's the diaphragm moving up and down, it's breathing you. And I like to imagine that I can breathe in and out through the eyes of my lungs, nestled right behind the center of my collarbones. And then the fourth quality of the breath, rest. It's bringing slightly more awareness this week to any pause that might naturally happen at the end of your exhale. And today we'll layer in the idea of stop and wait in that pause. So as we exhale, if we feel that a rest naturally occurs, hone the ability to pause and wait until your body sends the signal to draw an inhale. You can bring that same stop and wait awareness to the rest at the top of the inhale. And we're not retaining, holding, hugging the breath at all. We're really seeing if we can find some play within our voluntary, involuntary breathing pattern. So maybe getting out of the way enough to notice our body's own need for breath. Well, now we'll layer in just a touch of resistance. And a lot of you may have practiced Ujjayi before. We'll go very slowly and softly. If it causes any tension, lightheadedness, dizziness, you just let it go and return to breathing in and out the nose. So the space we're going to make this resistance occur is in the diaphragm of our throat or our vocal cords. It's a really gentle hugging together of the vocal cords, which lay down in the soft spot in the crook of your throat, down by your collarbones. So as you feel a breath rise in through your nose on the inhale, you can exhale and imagine you're breathing out through your mouth as if you were to fog a pane of glass. can explore that on your own, breathing out through the open mouth. And then, as you're ready, see if you can explore that hug in the vocal cords on the exhale with the mouth closed. And the sound should be very soft and gentle, just for you, for nobody else. You may notice that creating this resistance on the exhale naturally lengthens the exhale by letting less oxygen flow out, less air flow out. So if this is new to you, it might be wonderful to just pause here. If this doesn't feel comfortable, you can have the same effect by pursing your lips and breathing out through the mouth, or placing the tip of your tongue to the back of your upper teeth and breathing out through the mouth. And if this feels good and it's a comfortable, familiar place for you, feel free to keep the hug of the vocal cords as you breathe in through the nose as well. So you'll hear a slight sound of the ocean, like listening to the inside of a seashell with your inhale and exhale. Now, keeping the resistance breath throughout, or letting it go anytime that it starts to create tension. We'll move our practice into vritti pranayama. And there's two different approaches, and we'll start with sama vritti. So sama, equal and same. And in this case, vritti is a course of action. So we're taking the action of creating equal ratio between our inhale and exhale. So I invite you to begin by simply counting this incoming inhale in your own mind. 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. And counting your outgoing exhale in your mind. So for Samavritti, shorten whichever aspect of the breath was longer, so that we don't create tension in the breath. So if your inhale was a count of 4 and your exhale was a count of 5 or 6, we'll bring the exhale in to a 4 count. So this is different for everybody. Remember, you were just counting your own breath ratio in this moment, shortening the longer side of the breath to meet whichever side of the breath was shorter. Now noticing as you breathe in, counting in your mind, and breathe out, counting in your mind, that for some of us that become accustomed to lengthening our exhale, it can feel tricky to shorten up a side of our breath to create equanimity and sameness in the breath. And we would say that this practice creates evenness in the nervous system. It's a balancing breath. And whenever you feel there's space to lengthen the side of your breath that felt slightly shorter, you just lengthen both counts out. So maybe if you started with 4, you move to 5 in and 5 out. When you arrive at 5 or 6 counts, you have naturally discovered resonant rate. So when we breathe in a count of 5 or 6, We're breathing 5 to 6 breaths a minute, and that's that beautiful golden ratio that we discussed earlier. And now we're going to add on a practice to explore lengthening our exhale, which also has some extra toning benefits for the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system. So Brahmari pranayama is when we make a gentle humming sound as we exhale. And you're all muted, so nobody will hear you, and I'll just contribute my humming sound once or twice. And since we're a trauma-informed organization, there is a way you can practice it where you close off your ears and rest your fingertips on your head. But I don't recommend sharing that in a trauma-informed practice. It can feel unsafe. But if in your own practice you'd like to explore that, it's really interesting. So I'm going to allow my inhale to come in. I'm going to count it. And I'm going to hum as I exhale. Inhale. Continuing on your own, if it feels good. Notice if you tend to leave some of your exhale behind. When we add sound, it's a really great way of noticing how fully we're really exhaling. And you can try and play around in a space of a full exhale, but without crossing the border where you feel air hungry or gasping when the inhale begins to fill you again. If you find a gaspy, air hungry place, then pull back the exhale ever so slightly. Remember, that's probably also the chemoreceptors, just being accustomed to a particular oxygen, CO2 level in your body, and we have to work with them patiently. When we exhale too fully, we can create a panic in our body where our body senses that we're not getting enough oxygen, and that'll have the opposite effect and cause us to start to involuntarily breathe quickly and high in our lungs. So now let's allow the humming to become quiet again. We're going to let all of the tools rest aside for a moment. So we were working our rider and our horse together. Let's take a moment to just be together without doing. Noticing any shift of sensation in the body or the breath. Noticing any shift in the quality of the mind, the thoughts. And our last practice for today will combine what we've explored together. So the other side of the Vritti pranayama is Vishama Vritti, which means uneven ratio of breath. And even though there are a lot of ways to explore different ratios, the favorite of most of the old yogic texts is a longer exhale and a 1-to-2 breath ratio. So for every 1 count of inhale, there are 2 counts of exhale. The reason we did Brahmari already is because it tends to naturally put us into a 1-to-2 inhale to exhale ratio. So you could play around with that and notice if it was your experience as well. Here we're going to use the counting. So when you're ready, you're going to return to your counting of your inhale. And as you count your exhale, find an even ratio. So returning to your last Samavrti ratio. And then on your next exhale, see how it feels to lengthen your exhale count by just 1. So if you inhaled 4, maybe now you exhale 5. You can stay there, or if and whenever you're ready, could add another count. Again, we want to try and not create mental tension, so don't need to become too fussy about the counting. Remembering also to stop and wait if it feels good. So noticing if there is a natural inclination to stop and wait at the top of the inhale, maybe just for a brief moment, or the bottom of the exhale. And continuing to lengthen your exhale count as it's comfortable. So if you found your inhale count was 4, heading towards an exhale count of 8. If you felt your inhale count was 6, heading toward an exhale count of 12. Remembering the texture, slow and smooth. The space of the lower belly, low lungs, front rib cage, side and back rib cage, clavicles, scapula. And now, if you found your breath walked its way out close to or to a 2-to-1 ratio, on your next exhale, shorten your exhale back by a count or 2. So if your exhale was 12, now it's 10. And shorten your exhale count back by a count of 1 or 2 again. According to yogic tradition and science, this strong lengthening of the exhale does more than bring us into balance. It opens a door into deep rest and calm and relaxation. As you find your breath ratio back to sama, equal, Just check in with how your travels went, you and your horse, through this territory. Releasing all the counting, all the tools now. Allowing yourself to be here for just one more moment. See if you can find a place now where you are a witness to your own involuntary breath. See if you can find a glimpse of a part of an inhale or exhale that you didn't control or do. And bringing movement back gently into your body. Fingers or toes. Maybe the head rocks gently. Always remembering that we don't have to put back on anything that dropped away from us. So if you want to stay and rest and meditate, by all means, feel free. And if you're coming back to the doing of life, you can start to curl your way over and up. Wow, we did a lot. We did a lot. How's everybody doing? Amazing. Good.